next we're going to be talking to Meghan Murphy. A lot of our audience will also, from both here in Ireland and international, will be very familiar with Meghan's work. So Meghan Murphy is a Canadian writer. She's a journalist and she's the founder of Feminist Current, of course, a feminist website and podcast. Her writing, speeches and talks have criticised third wave feminism, and why not, male feminists, the sex industry, exploitation of women in mass media, censorship and gender identity legislation. Meghan is based in Vancouver and she's written for CBC News, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, Rabble.ca, the New Statesman and Quillette, amongst other media outlets. As mentioned, Meghan founded Feminist Current website and podcast, and this was back in 2012. Describing itself as Canada's leading feminist website, the mission of Feminist Current is to provide a unique perspective on male violence against women, pop culture, politics, current events, sexuality, gender, and many other issues that are often underrepresented or misrepresented by mainstream, progressive, and feminist media sources. I feel like I should really put quotes around progressive there. Meghan has argued that trigger warnings amount to censorship. She has written about ageism within feminism, and she has criticised liberal feminism. She supported the Me Too movement. She's also argued that anti-bullying campaigns ignore sexism and the way young men are taught to view women. She is also highly critical of the sex and porn industries, which she regards as, quote, inherently misogynistic and exploitative, end quote. And she has written about her support for the Nordic model in which buying but not selling of sex is illegal. Famously, Twitter permanently suspended Meghan's account in late November 2018 after she referred to trans woman Jessica Yaniv, also known as, forgive my crudeness, Wax My Balls Yaniv, as him. For that crime, she's been banned. I gather she's appealing it, but her appeals so far have not met with success. So listen, we are absolutely thrilled to be here from you this evening and to welcome you to our seminar, Meghan. So we're really looking forward to your discussion this evening. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I hate listening to my bio, but I appreciate you compiling that. Thanks everyone for attending, and thanks to the Irish Women's Lobby for hosting this conversation. I've written and spoken extensively about the silencing of women over the years. Historically, women have been vilified, ostracized, beaten, burned for speaking out of turn, for telling inconvenient truths, for naming abuse and abusers. After over a century of fighting for women's right to be heard, respected, and treated as persons equal under the law, we have found ourselves in the odd position of being silenced, censored, and smeared, canceled, as it were, simply for daring to remind the world that women's rights are for women, so females, for a reason. We didn't need to fight for rights because we felt feminine, because we wanted to wear dresses, use gender-neutral pronouns, or get cosmetic surgeries, altering our bodies beyond all recognition. We fought for our rights because as females, the members of the human species capable of giving birth, we were treated differently, told we couldn't make choices about our own lives, participate in politics, the workforce, sports, academia, or broadly public life. We belonged to men, quite literally, and they could do with us as they wished. As women, we were once told we didn't need independence. Men had that, and they would be sure to speak and act on our behalf. Of course, things didn't play out like that, so women had to risk it all to have their say, to be visible, and to be treated with respect and taken seriously. In every political movement in history, speech has mattered. The right to protest is a key civil right attached to free speech. Without free speech, marginalized groups could not have advanced and fought back against their oppression or in defense of their human rights. Yet, too many feminists today either fail to defend free speech or they actually fight against it. Our own speech matters a great deal to us, but we often fail to extend that understanding to groups we disagree with or view as being at odds with our project. I think that we may have in the West forgotten how much we once had to struggle. We've achieved so much. We might fail to understand or recall what our sisters of previous generations have suffered or what women in other countries continue to suffer. In Canada, where I'm from, I think this is particularly and glaringly obvious. We took our rights and freedoms for granted, and now we face losing them all. And far too many, the majority, seem unconcerned, as though, this can't just all slip through our fingers. In recent years, women have faced silencing in a whole new way. We can no longer speak about biology, the reality of reproduction, women's bodies, and sex without being labeled as transphobic. To say that women are adult human females has been deemed hate speech. And as you all know now, I was permanently suspended from Twitter for referring to a predatorial male as he, which is something that apparently constitutes hateful conduct. As many or most of you probably know, a UK woman named Maya Forstater is currently in court after losing her job for saying that men cannot become women. Journalist Abigail Schreier wrote a book about the trend of girls transitioning to attempt to become boys and the causes and impacts of such a trend. And both Amazon and Target attempted to ensure her book was inaccessible to purchase. The American Civil Liberties Union Deputy Director for Transgender Justice tweeted, "Stopping the circulation of this book and these ideas is 100% a hill I will die on." So that's the same American Civil Liberties Union that rightly defended the rights of Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois in 1977. And I don't say rightly because I support Nazis, but because I support free speech, everyone's free speech. So this same ACLU also recently blocked a woman's Freedom of Information request for data on the number of trans-identified males currently being housed in women's prisons in Washington state. Today, we have to come to terms with the reality that it's not the right. It's, it's in the past, it was the right who wanted to censor, but today it's not the right who's fighting to censor opponents, it's progressives. And I think that we haven't all yet come to terms with that reality. And, while the right, of course, may not have historically been friends to feminists, we need to come to terms with the fact that the threat of totalitarianism and oppression can come from any direction. And we need to fight it regardless of what end of the political spectrum is leading the charge, even if it doesn't fit our preferred narrative, even if it's unexpected or irrational, even if we don't want to believe it. So back in 2016, the Liberal Party of Canada, widely viewed as sort of center-left in Canada, introduced Bill C-16, which would add gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination and the criminal code. There was no public debate. The media refused to acknowledge dissent for the most part, and too many of those who were actually aware that the bill was working its way through the system, which was not many of us, because again, the media really didn't cover the fact that this bill was being pushed through. They did sort of mildly in a positive way. Too many failed to speak up. Maybe they didn't imagine the impact would be as serious as it turned out to be, and as impactful as a few of us warned it would be. As lots of people know, Jordan Peterson warned that the bill could lead to compelled speech. as we'd be all forced to use preferred pronouns regardless of their irrationality, which has come to fruition. A Canadian father named Rob Hoogland is now in jail for refusing to support his daughter's desire to live as a boy, to be referred to as he, and to begin the process of transitioning. He continued to speak out in defense of his daughter's best interest, despite orders not to, and he is being punished harshly for doing so. I also, of course, spoke against Bill C-16 and struggled to be heard. I believe I was the only person in Canada who published a piece in the mainstream media arguing that the bill would harm women and women's rights. And I also, of course, testified against the bill in the Senate. So for this, I've been tarred as bigoted, deemed persona non grata by Canadian media, protested, threatened, and canceled by the Canadian left, as well as by many friends and acquaintances. And today, just a few years later, the concerns expressed by people like Peterson and myself, along with a few others, including a Quebec women's group, Pour les droits des femmes, are a reality. Feminists know all too well how this legislation has impacted our speech and spaces. In Canada, any man who announces he identifies as a woman is allowed access to women's shelters, transition houses, change rooms, sports teams, prisons, and women who feel uncomfortable about this are ignored or vilified. Apparently, the feelings and safety of half of the population matter less than the desires or delusions of a few men. The funding of women's organizations in Canada is now dependent on their willingness to go along with the mantra that trans women are women. You know, we also know that gender identity ideology and legislation affects all kinds of people, not just women and not just feminists. You know, men like Peterson and Hoogland may not be perfect allies to the feminist movement, yet their speech does matter, and they were absolutely correct in their fights. And I feel frustrated that a lot of feminists in Canada still remain steadfast in their refusal to engage with people who don't toe their line. I feel like they're kind of missing the point. And we even do this to one another. So women who don't share our exact politics and perspectives are deemed bad feminists or not feminists at all and ostracized as such. I want to know where we expect to get with this approach. How can we complain when we're treated this way by the left and by mainstream media when we turn around and do it to ourselves, to those who don't fit our criteria of political purity? Those who view themselves as political people, people who fight for justice and what's right, need to remember that politics are for the people. Activism should be about fighting for truth and freedom and rights. It should not be about elitism or creating an exclusive club. Our ideologies are not more important than real people and real people's lives. And whether or not a woman is politically pure, according to someone else's standards, should not determine whether she's worthy of respect or whether she can participate in the women's rights movement or whether she should be treated with humanity and kindness. The same goes for all people. Yes, feminism is for women, but that doesn't mean that men and men's lives and rights don't matter. Everyone's free speech matters. It's all worth fighting for. There's no point in fighting for free speech only for those we like or agree with. And feminists make a grave mistake in failing to stand up for all free speech. And that includes internet censorship and these new hate crime bills, like the legislation recently passed in Scotland, which, as mentioned earlier, of course, by Lisa, created a new defense of stirring up hatred on the grounds of religion, sexual orientation, age, disability, or transgender identity. So while it is totally baffling and insulting that sex was not included in this list of protected categories, I think that feminists are wrong to believe that the solution is simply to add protection for women within this kind of legislation. Stirring up hatred is way too vague a thing to criminalize. And considering that we've seen in the UK people like Harry Miller investigated by the police for tweets, he was essentially accused of wrongthink for tweeting a limerick that was critical of gender identity ideology, which was subsequently recorded as a hate incident. I think we need to be, considering this, we need to be incredibly vigilant about ensuring we don't go down these paths, and that we don't allow this kind of thing to become practice in our own countries. We should be able to see now how focusing on particular identities deemed to be marginalized and therefore in need of protection from hate leads to curtailment of free speech. Hate isn't always a neutral fact. It's often a matter of opinion. I've argued, for example, that the word TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, exists to vilify and discriminate against and target women with violence and harassment. I think that's true and observable. Based on standard definitions, it would constitute hate speech, but I actually don't want the term TERF to be criminalized. My preference is to have open conversations. I don't believe we need protection from words, no matter how upsetting or offensive those words might be. This approach only makes us vulnerable. If we want to protect our own speech, we need to protect all speech, even speech that we might view as misogynist, racist, Islamophobic, or otherwise offensive to our sensibilities and political views. It is much better to discuss such ideas and words openly than to live in a world where some topics of conversation, ideologies, beliefs, facts, or arguments are untouchable. So at every talk or event I have done with regard to the topic of gender identity, every one of those events has been threatened with cancellation. Few venues will agree to host such conversations to begin with, and those who do often will pull out due to activist pressure or violent threats. Those who disagree with me refuse to engage in conversation or debate, insisting simply that allowing me to speak is dangerous or harms trans-identified people, which is nonsense. I speak about material reality and the rights of women and girls. But the fact that basic conversations about material reality and fundamental rights can, in 2021, be deemed unspeakable goes to show how quickly the tables can turn. And we need to be wary of that every time we deem someone bad without considering their full humanity. When we refuse to listen or engage in conversation with someone simply because he or she has been labeled by others in a way that doesn't suit us, when we call for another's speech to be shut down, or when we support censorship. In Canada, we thought we lived in a progressive country. I thought that for a very long time, and that our rights were protected. We would not have imagined feminist speech be criminalized. And yet here we are, we're faced with an internet hate speech bill now that will surely limit our ability to speak basic truths. The bill will include the creation of a new regulator who will be responsible for enforcing the new statutory definition of hate, including requiring online platforms to take down illegal content within 24 hours. Like, I don't feel like I'm going to be able to exist in Canada if this bill passes. You know, when things like misgendering or dead naming have been determined to be hate speech, and when criticizing or questioning the notion that a person can simply identify as a woman regardless of being male, when that's said to equate to violence or harm, these kinds of bills really should terrify us. Yet I suspect, just as with Bill C-16, we'll hear little from Canadian feminists, many of whom are either too afraid to speak out or too stuck in their politics to speak out about something they fear may cause them to be viewed as aligned with those they believe are political enemies. In places like China and South Korea, radical feminists have been censored from speaking, even anonymously online. In the West, radical and gender critical feminists are seeing their forums banned from social media platforms like Reddit. But it isn't only radical feminist speech that's being removed from the internet. It's also Donald Trump fans, white supremacists, those deemed conspiracy theorists, and more. And while I'm certain many feminists could put forth arguments to explain why their forms and words should be permitted online, but not MAGA acolytes or people who are critical of vaccines. This is where we've got it wrong, because this is all about perspective. Those who wish to ban the gender critical subreddit see those women as dangerous, akin to Nazis, touting myths about trans people, and spreading hate. And it might not be true, but that is the perception of many, just as it's the perception of many that, you know, all Trump voters are evil racists who hate women and immigrants, or that people who are like critical of the COVID response are spreading conspiracy theories and endangering people's health. The truth is rarely so simple. But the point is that there is no one in this world I trust to determine whose ideas are worth hearing and whose are worth being banned. In Canada, I have required private security, bodyguards, and police escorts every time I give a talk about women's rights. About 700 people protested outside my talk at the Toronto Public Library in 2019. There was a petition demanding the library cancel the event. This petition was launched by a number of Canadian writers. So, you know, the kind of people who you would think would be defending free expression. And these writers in this petition accused me of disseminating hate speech and insinuated the group of women organizing the event was a hate group. So one of the things they argued was, this is their quote, "There's a difference between denying free speech and what is known as deplatforming, which is when you refuse to allow hate speech to be disseminated in your facility. This has been an effective tactic to stop those who capitalize on spreading hate speech, such as Meghan Murphy." And they also used Twitter's decision to ban me as further justification for their claims. So that's, you know, people who I'm fairly certain consider themselves to be leftists, progressives, are putting trust in these big tech corporations to determine acceptable speech. These writers threatened to no longer participate in Toronto Public Library events should my talk go forward. The library did not comply. Vickery Bowles, who is city librarian for the Toronto Public Library, insisted on defending the mandate of public libraries, free expression. And she explained, "We are a democratic institution and we are standing up for free speech." It's amazing to me how few today stand up for and understand the importance of these values, especially in places like progressive Canada. The petition asked, "Please keep TPL safe for our most marginalized community members." Yet activists stood outside my event, hurling threats and vitriol at anyone attempting to enter the library to attend the talk. So violent threats against women apparently don't impede safety, so long, I guess, as those threats are directed at bad women. Last year, an event scheduled at Simon Fraser University, actually maybe late 2019, was canceled at the very last minute, I think like a day or two before the event was supposed to happen, because there were threats so violent from trans activists that SFU's security team determined that they wouldn't be able to guarantee the safety of attendees or staff. The event was moved to the Pan Pacific Hotel, where young women stood outside with a cardboard guillotine with the words "TERFs and SWERFs, step right up" written on it. I've had to file a police report in Vancouver after being followed around my neighborhood by a local trans activist, Morgane Auger, who was the previous vice president of the BC NDP and was a delegate representing the British Columbia Council for International Cooperation at the UN Commission on the Status of Women in March. My website, of course, has been attacked countless times by trans activists and taken down. And, you know, we obviously got it back up again, but it was a major struggle. I've received obscene phone calls. I've received calls from the police warning me about threats against my life. At a panel discussion in Seattle, I participated in last year, we got a bomb threat, and protesters disrupted the event to such an extent that they had to be carried out by the police. I really can't even begin to think about or compile the vile and terrifying things that have been said to me online and over email, which apparently are perfectly fine with our big tech overlords, but don't say men aren't women. And still, despite all of this, my biggest concern is that I won't be able to speak the truth in Canada, that I won't be able to write words like men are not women or refer to male predators as he. If we can't speak the truth, if we can't debate ideas, policy, legislation, and opinion, if we can't argue in defense of our interests and rights, we have nothing, we're hooped. Free speech is not just an important fight, it is the important fight. And the time to fight is right now before it's too late. And I really hope that we all wake up before it's too late.
Thank you, Meghan. That was just fantastic altogether. A real insight into what's been going on over in Canada and what you've been putting up with. Very much, I think Canada have like been at the vanguard of the horrors that are raining down upon us all. But Ireland, of course, is not trotting too far behind you at this stage. So listen, thank you very much. Thank you to all three of you. Now, we do have, we don't have an awful lot of time, but a panelist has, people have been submitting a couple of letters. So there's a question here, Isolde. I see a parallel between the Amnesty letter recommending refusal of political representation to people holding certain views and the view expressed by the judge in the Maya Forstater case that her views were not worthy of respect in a democratic society. And people are wondering, does the panel share her opinion? And I'll ask you first, Isolde.
Yeah. So I attended the Maya appeal on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I had a login and I attended the whole thing. And it was highly instructional, not necessarily, I mean, I'm very hopeful that her appeal will be successful, because I think under UK law, it will succeed. I'm not sure that it would succeed under our law. But Anne's question is entirely correct, and the whole defence mounted by CGD against Maya's appeal is that the GRA essentially defined sex as a spectrum when it defined sex and allowed anybody to change sex. Now that's quite at odds with what the EHRC, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, had made in their submission. But the defence submission was that sex is definitely a binary. The GAR law had defined it that way, and that society has clearly moved on using the Yogi Carter principles and the Equality Equal Bench Treatment book, which are just guides, but guides created by activists. And that all of these things show that society has moved on. The notion that sex is biological is pretty well nonsensical and not worthy of respect in a democratic society. And moreover, by stating that, and the things that follow from stating that, which means that it is legitimate in certain instances to use pronouns that are related to sex, and it is legitimate if sex is immutable, biological, and binary is a protected philosophical belief. It is absolutely legitimate to use sentences and phrases and descriptions like Meghan just did, which is that a trans woman is a man. And the defense was that that creates an existential threat to trans people, an existential threat to them, and it is not something that should be tolerated in a democratic society. So it matches up exactly with what's in the Amnesty letter.
And yet, bizarrely, apparently removing sex isn't an existential threat to women, funnily enough. So listen, thank you very much, Isolde. Would you maybe something next to Lisa, would you like to speak to that question, Lisa?
Not much more to say. I mean, I agree with Isolde. There are parallels there. I mean, I found it very troubling. I was a member of Amnesty for 2 decades. I'm not anymore. The idea that they would seek to deny political representation to people with differing views just completely contradicts the ethos or the founding principle of Amnesty. And of course, we've seen this manifesting in other ways with Amnesty recently, that they've removed prisoner of conscience status to Alexei Navalny. And again, when I was a member of Amnesty, that was one of this is a core principle, founding principle of the organization, and it's absolutely unfathomable that that they would move away from that. I mean, really troubling, and obviously parallels with what's been going on in terms of their attitude to women's sex-based rights and the issue of prostitution as well. I mean, they're firmly on the side of sex work is work. So yeah, they seem to have lost their way, and I don't know what's going to happen. Either they can be reformed from the inside, or someone will have to break away and start from scratch, which is sort of devastating, really, because it takes a long time to set up these institutions and to build momentum. And of course, they've achieved so many great things in the past for prisoners of conscience. It's really sad.
Yes, I was a member of Amnesty myself for some years, but no longer, of course. So actually, Meghan, we have a specific question in for you, which is asking, and even though I think to a certain extent you've actually spoken to this, because the question is that given the recent changes to Bill C-10, what can we do to support freedom of speech in Canada? I suppose you've already discussed really how it is about speaking up and writing, speaking out and writing, but have you any specific advice that you can give?
Right. I mean, yeah, I think that when this bill comes up, we need to do anything we can to fight it, just as, we have to do anything we can to fight any of these gender identity bills, which includes writing articles, which includes meeting with our local politicians, with our MPs, educating people about why it matters, because I really do, particularly in Canada, I think we're very complacent and we trust our government a lot. And we really shouldn't. So, I think that people trust that if the government is going to pass a bill around hate speech, it's because they're really trying to protect people, and they're really trying to protect people from hate speech, and they're trying to create a better, more just country, society. But I think these kinds of bills are really terrifying. As I mentioned during my talk, they're certainly going to curtail our speech as feminists. They'll curtail lots of people's speech. I mean, if they're going to start taking content down from the internet that they've deemed illegal, and gender identity and gender expression is protected under the criminal code, what do you think is going to happen to, websites like my website? I mean, we are hosted in the US intentionally. But there's other websites that are run by women in Canada now, thank goodness, for, who are organizing around these issues. We're not going to be able to speak about this on social media, that's for sure. That's already happening. Who knows if we'll be able to speak about it in public? I mean, that's not online, so that's a different issue, but it's really, it's really dangerous.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that strikes me in that I think there's so much of this legislation around the hate speech and the rest of it's like so many of the corporations taking on, diversity, draping themselves in the rainbow flag. And an awful lot of this very much is greenwashing, rainbow washing. It's about deflecting from the very deeply unethical practices they may have exploiting other people in other parts of the world. If we think in terms of some of the big global corporations. And it also strikes me, thinking of Canada in particular, is that if the government was really serious about wanting to protect the most vulnerable in society, that they might actually take action over the huge numbers of Indigenous women that are raped and murdered and that went missing and where there's no follow-up, and they might look at tightening up the police practices around them do you know what I mean? It seems to me that an awful lot of even hate speech, for all the huge dangers that it has, not least of which is it just being a license for states to exercise complete totalitarian control over what is and isn't sayable in the public sphere. I mean, that limits on speech has never been a good thing in any society anywhere that has happened, but that it's serving a dual purpose. Not only would it ultimately give far more power to the state, but also it serves to deflect from the ever-increasing levels of inequality and the ever-increasing levels of poverty that are growing all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's like I heard Sarah Ahmed, who of course would have views very different to mine on a lot of things, which was talking about how all the universities have incorporated gender equality and diversity units, but it's very much a way of deflecting from the very real inequalities. If you really look amongst the staff, their working conditions, etc., the rise of precarity, how little power people really have in the university setting, but it's deflected by this allure that is nearly being created by this kind of legislation, you know, work in the universities as well as legislation. So I suppose I just want, sorry, Isolde.
Yeah, can I just throw in one last thing? You know, we should be very wary of the hate speech legislation, but Meghan is extremely correct to keep pointing out the issues with big tech. And the fact that our public square is now on Twitter. The influence from Twitter is absolutely massive. It is so easy to get a suspension or a ban on Twitter through not saying anything even remotely controversial, because activists use the algorithm to mass report to make it seem like there's an issue there, and then you have to fight the ban. I mean, as much as I don't miss Trump on Twitter, I still don't think he should have been kicked off Twitter, and he was only kicked off Twitter because the Democrats had won the election. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been kicked off Twitter. Big tech has a huge amount to answer here, and that has no legislation governing it yet. So we all need to be really aware of the role of big tech in narrowing the window of acceptable speech as well.
Yes, even when I thought myself that while now I wouldn't give Trump obviously the time of day, but I thought it was shocking when they actually removed his press person. They took her off Twitter. They suspended her for 12 hours, for 24 hours. And I said, we have a tech company here suspending the public representative of the President of the United States. That was an absolutely appalling act by a tech company, and that nobody had saw it for what it was. I was really shocked at the time, and I just simply cannot believe all the so-called left-wing, so-called progressives who are hopping on board, demanding, in fact, the effective removal of the right to freedom of speech, and they're heralding as if it's going to be a good thing. I think some of them should maybe open a history book. Lisa, would you like to add anything here? Or also, I suppose I was wondering, is there anything that we can do that you can do in Scotland about this legislation? Is there any further court of appeal in any way that you can do something to challenge what has happened with the hate crime in Scotland?
Well, not in the immediate term. I mean, it just received royal assent last Friday. This piece of legislation. So it's not actually in force yet, though. I think there will need to be various regulations brought forward. That we're just about to have an election in Scotland next Thursday. So when the new Parliament begins sitting, I think what will come forward is a series of statutory instruments which will basically bring into force different aspects of the legislation. So it's not in force. I mean, I think the Conservative Party manifesto for the election states that they would repeal part 2 of the legislation, which is the creation of the new offences of stirring up hatred. The Conservatives are not likely to win the election, so it's pretty unlikely that that proposal will see the light of day. So, I mean, we sit here feeling a little sick, wondering what might happen in the coming months and years, and hoping very much that our most profound fears about legislation don't come to fruition. And the points that the Justice Minister kept making all throughout the debates was, well, you know, there's a very high legal threshold for stirring up hatred, and the courts will ultimately decide. But the point that we were at pains to get across to him was, we accept that there may not be many, if any, convictions under this legislation, but what was very likely to happen, in our view, is malicious police reports. You may even get to the stage where a case is prosecuted, even if it doesn't end up in a conviction, and that's an incredible, damaging experience for anyone caught up in the criminal justice system. And again, we brought and put in front of MSPs the various cases from England, not under hate crime legislation, but sort of malicious communications type legislation, where people had become ensnared in the criminal justice system for months and months of their lives. Hellish experiences, to make the point that, you know, you don't need to get to the point of a courtroom. You may never get there, but the impact on people's lives, the human cost of ensnaring people, and the chilling effect. I mean, that's why we're speaking tonight. Women are self-censoring already. I mean, I think carefully about the things I put on Twitter. You know, we've seen what's happened to Meghan and other feminists who've wanted to just make basic statements about biological facts on that forum. So the chilling effect is already here. And in fact, the slide I didn't show at the end was about 10 days after the bill passed. So in the run-up to election, women are taking all sorts of direct action and protests. A woman who happens to be the great niece of one of the founders of the Scottish National Party, as it turns out, she went to the Scottish Government building and she chalked on the wall, Scottish Government hates women, or something like that. And she had a knock on the door from the police the next day. And she was told if she indulged in that behaviour again, that might be considered a breach of the peace. So not under the hate crime legislation. So women are already being pulled up for exercising their freedom of expression rights. And this is before the bill even comes into force. So, I mean, it's an awful feeling, but it's sort of sit and wait and see what happens.
It's just absolutely horrifying. And I think at this stage, we're after coming to the witching hour of 8 o'clock. And I'm just trying to see if there's any particular questions, or there has been a number of questions. I think, though, in one way that or another, they've actually already been addressed over the course of your discussion. So I think at this stage, I'm just going to thank you all for your absolutely wonderful contributions. Hopefully we can, I think Isolt is waving there. Wants to say.
Just to say, anybody of you who are on Clubhouse, I'm hosting an after party on Clubhouse. I put a link up in the chat and you can use that link to join Clubhouse if you're not a member of Clubhouse. Clubhouse is, if you don't know what it is, you just need to join and see what it is. But if you want to come and have a real chat, that's where I'll be hanging out after this. So the link is up on Clubhouse, or you can message me. You can get in touch with me on Twitter and I'll give you the link as well. You need to have an iPhone, but it'd be great to have some people come over and chat. So lovely to meet you all, and thanks a million to the Irish Women's Lobby for inviting me, and lovely to join these wonderful other panelists.
Oh, listen, thank you, Isolt. Of course, the thing about the Clubhouse is that it's for iPhone users only, isn't that correct? Only people.
That is correct. I'm just about to put the link back up again, though, on the chat, if anybody wants it.
And listen to Lisa and to Meghan. Thank you so much for taking time out of your undoubtedly really busy days as well to chat with us this evening. We really appreciate it. It's been fantastic. Hopefully you can all come back again at some later event that we will be having and update us, and hopefully we might have something to celebrate. Or either that, or we can all just, cry our misery together as we plot and plan, as women have always had to do, in order to overcome the patriarchy and their attempts to silence us. They seem to really have the wind under their wings at the moment, but let's just hope we can take aim and take them down. Unfortunately, the situation is getting away from us here and there. There was a very interesting question there, which unfortunately we just don't have time really to get to, which is from one woman. She's saying, one of the things I don't understand is the why of all this. Does anyone have any thoughts? If I could ask maybe for a one sentence, perhaps, or two summation, if you want to throw it out there. If not, that's okay. But perhaps, Lisa, I'll ask you, any thoughts as to why it's happening? The why of all this?
Well, I do think in some parts of the developed world, I do think maybe this is a backlash against the gains that women have made.
Yeah, I think
there are
so.
some people who, and I don't use mediocre as a pejorative term, because I think we should all be allowed to be mediocre. But I do wonder whether, in times gone by, the most mediocre man could get won over the most intelligent woman, and that's not the case anymore. And I wonder whether that's part of the picture.
Could
a bit
be.
Random, but.
Thank you. No, thank you, Lisa. Definitely part of it. Meghan?
I mean, I think that my response might come off as a bit rude, but I'll.
We're all adults here. I'd say we can cope.
I mean, I think I do think a lot of this push has to do with, sort of men, and many of whom are quite rich and powerful, who want to justify their identities as women, and so they're trying to push this born this way narrative. They're trying to push the idea that there's such a thing as a trans kid, essentially to justify and validate their own fantasies and fetishes, and to be entitled to do whatever they like and behave however they like, and have women not be able to say anything to challenge them.
I think it's certainly a part of it. I think there are complex issues coming together. Part of it is definitely the backlash, the feminist backlash or anti-feminist backlash, and part of it is definitely the agendas of a few individuals. And then we have the agenda of tech generally and whoever else might be running the world. So little, I'll leave it at that then. I'd like to thank our audience very much for joining with us this evening. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here as well. To be very, whilst it would be more than enjoyable for us to speak amongst ourselves, it is great, of course, to be able to share the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience of these wonderful women with so many people. So listen, thank you very, very much. Really delighted to have had your company here this evening. Hopefully our audience will join us again at our next webinar, which will be approximately a month to 6 weeks time. So listen, thanks very much. This is an urgent decision. We must all seriously think about the upcoming legislation here. As we can see from the experience in Scotland and Canada, things are not good, and they're not going to be getting any better soon. Certainly not unless the women stand up and speak up for our rights. Okay, thanks everybody. Good night now. Take care. Bye.